Think about the weight of a single decision, one choice that could determine the fate of thousands, shape the course of history, or define your legacy. Whether you're leading a team at work, guiding your family through uncertain times, or simply trying to navigate the pressures of daily life, that sense of responsibility can feel overwhelming. It's a feeling that hasn't changed much over the centuries. 2,000 years ago, Roman generals stood on battlefields, surrounded by chaos, with that same crushing weight on their shoulders. But they had a secret weapon, not a better sword or a larger army, but a philosophy that taught them how to command without crumbling under the pressure. This is the story of how Roman generals used Stoicism to command armies without losing themselves. Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's greatest emperors and a devoted Stoic, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That idea that true power comes from within was at the heart of Stoic philosophy. It wasn't about suppressing emotion or becoming cold and unfeeling. Instead, it was about mastering your inner world so you could act with clarity, courage, and compassion, even in the most trying circumstances. The Stoics believed that by focusing on what they could control, their judgments, their actions, their character, they could remain steady no matter what happened around them. This mindset allowed generals to lead with unwavering resolve, inspire loyalty in their troops, and make rational decisions in the heat of battle, all while protecting their own humanity from the corrosive effects of power and stress. In this video, we'll explore the key Stoic principles that shaped some of history's most remarkable leaders. We'll delve into how they cultivated emotional control to avoid panic-driven mistakes, built resilience to endure incredible hardships, and maintained clarity of judgment when everything seemed to be falling apart. These aren't just dusty old ideas, they're practical tools that anyone can use to navigate modern challenges with more grace and purpose. So, as we step into the world of ancient Rome and its Stoic commanders, I want to leave you with this question. How can this ancient wisdom help us lead without burning out in today's fast-paced, high-pressure world? For these Roman generals, the most critical battle was never on the open field against a visible enemy. It was the silent, constant struggle within their own minds. They understood that external victories were fleeting if they lost control of their internal world. This foundational Stoic belief that true power and freedom come from mastering one's judgments and reactions formed the bedrock of their leadership philosophy. It's a concept known as the Dichotomy of Control, a mental framework that divides all of existence into two simple categories: things we have power over and things we do not. Our own actions, our opinions, our desires, and our aversions, these are within our control. Everything else, from the weather and the actions of others to our reputation, or even the outcome of a battle, ultimately is not. The Stoic commander's first duty was to rigorously focus all his energy and attention solely on that first category, freeing himself from the anxiety and distraction of trying to command the uncontrollable. The philosopher Epictetus, himself once a slave, put it with stark clarity: some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. A general like Scipio Africanus, who famously defeated Hannibal, embodied this principle. Facing the brilliant and unpredictable Carthaginian general, Scipio could not control Hannibal's tactics, the loyalty of all his own troops, or the timing of reinforcements. What he could control was his own preparation, his strategic analysis, and most importantly, his composure. By refusing to be rattled by setbacks or overexcited by advantages, he maintained a clarity of thought that allowed him to adapt and ultimately prevail at the Battle of Zama. His victory was a direct result of winning the internal battle first, of mastering his own fears and expectations before engaging the enemy. This ancient practice of discernment is perhaps more relevant today than ever. We constantly face a barrage of external events, market fluctuations, other people's opinions, traffic jams, unexpected news that we mistakenly believe we should be able to control. We tie our inner peace to these external outcomes, and when they don't go our way, we feel frustrated, anxious, and defeated, as if we've lost a battle. The Stoic mindset invites us to change the battlefield. Take a moment to identify one area in your own life right now where you might be confusing the external event itself with your internal reaction to it. Are you stressed about a project outcome you can't fully guarantee, or angry about a comment someone made that is ultimately a reflection of their own views, not your worth? The power to choose your response, to focus on your effort rather than the result, is the same power that allowed a Roman general to command thousands without losing his own sense of self. It begins with that simple, profound act of distinguishing between what is yours to manage and what is not. What does it take to keep a clear head when everything is falling apart? For a Roman general, this wasn't a philosophical exercise. It was a matter of life and death, the difference between a glorious victory and a catastrophic defeat. The chaos of battle was a perfect storm of sensory overload, the deafening clash of swords, the agonized cries of the wounded, the unpredictable movements of the enemy, and the constant, gnawing uncertainty. In the face of this, Stoicism provided a mental anchor. It taught that between any external event and our reaction, there exists a critical space, a pause. Within that space lies our freedom and our power to choose a rational response over a primal one. This practice of intentional pausing is what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, and it's a form of ancient cognitive behavioral therapy that is incredibly relevant to modern stress management. It's the conscious decision to not be carried away by the initial, visceral surge of emotion, but to instead subject that impression to the cool light of reason before giving it your approval. Seneca, the great Stoic statesman and dramatist, wrote extensively on the corrosive nature of unchecked emotion, particularly anger. He observed, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Ask anger at the first moment to give you a little time for consideration. Do not try to quench it altogether, for its first impulses are fierce. Beg of it a respite, not a pardon. Give it a little time to cool off, and then its own intensity will consume it. He understood that anger or panic is like a fire. It needs fuel to grow. That fuel is our immediate, unquestioning reaction. By inserting even a moment of delay, we starve the flame. A general who gave an order in a blind rage could send thousands to their deaths needlessly. A leader today who sends an email in a fit of frustration can damage relationships and derail careers. The principle is identical. We see this powerful calmness embodied in the historical account of Gaius Marius during the Battle of Aquae Sextiae in 102 BC. Facing a massive force of Teutonic tribes who were ferociously charging down a hill towards his numerically inferior Roman lines, Marius had every reason to panic. Instead, he remained preternaturally calm. He had positioned his forces carefully on high ground and instructed them to hold their position. As the enemy surged forward, their own momentum and the steep slope broke their formation. Marius, observing this disarray with a cool head, gave the order for his well-disciplined troops to countercharge at the perfect moment. His calm rationality in the face of what looked like certain disaster turned the tide completely, resulting in a stunning victory that secured his place in Roman history. His composure was a tactical weapon as potent as any legion. This ancient practice is a skill we can all cultivate. Think about a recent stressful situation you faced, a sudden criticism at work, a heated argument at home, a moment of unexpected bad news. Recall that first hot flash of emotion. Now, consider what might have happened if you had been able to channel a Stoic general in that moment. If you had created just a few seconds of space by taking a deep breath, by counting to 5, by physically stepping away, how might your response have changed? That pause isn't about inaction. It's about creating the conditions for purposeful action. It's in that quiet space that we reclaim our command post, access our reason, and choose a response we won't regret, ensuring we win our internal battles before engaging with the world. How we see a situation determines how we respond to it. This simple truth was a cornerstone of the Stoic commander's mindset. The Stoics proposed a radical idea that was both liberating and empowering. Events themselves are neutral. They are just things that happen. It is our judgments, our labels, our internal narratives about those events that assign them meaning, as either good or bad, as a catastrophe or an opportunity. A sudden storm isn't inherently bad. It is a meteorological event. For a general, the judgment that it is a disastrous setback that ruins his plans will lead to frustration, despair, and poor decisions. But the judgment that it is a chance to demonstrate resilience, to innovate, or even to catch the enemy off guard, transforms that same storm into a tactical advantage. This discipline of perception is about consciously choosing the latter framing, thereby taking control of the one thing you truly can, your perspective. Marcus Aurelius, leading the Roman Empire through plague and war, constantly practiced this reframing. In his private journal, now known as Meditations, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This wasn't just optimistic thinking, it was a strategic recalibration. An obstacle was no longer something to be lamented, it was the very path forward itself. It was the raw material for building strength, creativity, and resolve. A Roman general facing a fortified city, for instance, might initially see it as a massive impediment to his campaign, a delay that could cost him supplies and morale. But by applying this Stoic lens, he could reframe it. The siege could become an opportunity to train his engineers in new techniques, to demonstrate patience and endurance to his troops, and to exhaust the enemy's resources. The problem of the fortress was, in fact, the way to a more decisive and hardened army. We can see this principle in action with a commander like Julius Caesar during his campaign in Gaul. Faced with the formidable naval skills of the Veneti tribe, Caesar's first fleet was outmaneuvered and struggled in the unfamiliar tidal conditions. A leader with a victim mentality might have seen this as an insurmountable problem, a reason to retreat or blame his shipbuilders. Instead, Caesar perceived it as an engineering challenge. This setback became the catalyst for innovation. He ordered the construction of an entirely new kind of ship, designed with lower hulls and sails better suited for the Atlantic, and equipped with hooks to cut the enemy's rigging. His reframed perception of the problem from "we are outmatched" to "we need a new tool" led directly to a brilliant naval victory. He took the neutral event of a lost skirmish and, through his judgment, turned it into the fuel for a creative solution. This ancient mental technology is a powerful antidote to the modern sense of being overwhelmed. We all face our own fortresses and storms, a project that fails, a career setback, an unexpected personal challenge. The automatic, default judgment is often one of frustration and defeat. But what if you paused and asked the Stoic question, how can this obstacle become the way? That difficult conversation you're avoiding, could it be the very opportunity to build deeper trust and clarity? That project that just hit a major snag, could it force an innovation that actually makes the final result far better than the original plan? Your current problem right now is not just a problem, it is a blank slate. The meaning it holds is waiting for you to assign it. Try this reframing exercise today. Identify one single challenge you're facing and write down 3 ways it could actually be serving you as a lesson, a hidden opportunity, or a chance to develop a new strength. The event itself hasn't changed, but your perception of it has, and with that, you've already begun to command the situation. Consider the figure of Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, a man plowing his own small farm when messengers arrived to inform him he had been appointed dictator of Rome to face a dire military threat. He left his field, led the army to a swift and total victory, and then at the absolute peak of his power and prestige immediately resigned his supreme command and returned to his plow. He performed his duty to its fullest extent with absolute excellence and then detached from the glory and power that followed without a second thought. This is the essence of the Stoic virtue of duty without attachment. For the Stoic general, the objective was never personal fame, wealth, or even the avoidance of blame. The objective was to perform the action in front of them, the strategic planning, the leadership of men, the act of command, with virtue and excellence, and to remain indifferent to the rewards or criticisms that might come from it. The focus was on the quality of the effort itself, because that effort was the only thing truly within their control. The philosopher Epictetus, who had seen the fickle nature of public favor, drilled this idea home with characteristic bluntness. He instructed, when you do a thing because you have determined that it ought to be done, never avoid being seen doing it, even if the opinion of the multitude is going to condemn you. For if your action is wrong, then avoid doing it altogether. But if it is right, why do you fear those who will criticize you wrongly? This flips the entire motivation for action on its head. We are not to act for an audience, hoping for applause and dreading boos. We are to act because we have reasoned that the action is correct and virtuous. The opinion of the crowd, whether in the form of a triumphal parade or a vicious rumor, is classified firmly in the category of things not within our control. It is an external, to be acknowledged but not pursued. A general who fights for glory will grow reckless in pursuit of a famous victory. A general who fights from a fear of failure will become timid and hesitant. But a general who fights simply because it is his duty to protect Rome and his soldiers will find a steady, unwavering center that is immune to both the temptations of pride and the paralysis of fear. A powerful historical example of this principle in action is Gaius Duilius, the Roman consul who secured the Republic's first major naval victory against the Carthaginians at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC. For this unprecedented achievement, he was granted the honor of a Roman triumph, a parade through the city where the victorious general was treated like a god for a day. He was also granted the unique privilege of having a torch-bearer and a flute player accompany him whenever he walked home from dinner at night. Yet, despite these incredible accolades, Duilius is remembered by historians not for a prideful ego but for his profound humility. He dedicated a temple to the gods and, most tellingly, a rostral column commemorating the victory that was adorned not with a grandiose statue of himself, but with the bronze rams of the captured Carthaginian ships, a monument to the collective effort and sacrifice of the sailors and soldiers under his command. He performed his duty with excellence, accepted the honors given to him by the state, but remained detached from the personal glory, consistently directing the praise back to his men and to the Republic itself. This Stoic approach to action creates a profound sense of inner freedom. When your sense of worth and satisfaction is derived from the integrity of your own effort rather than the outcome, you become incredibly resilient. A project can fail commercially but still be a success in your eyes because you know you gave it your absolute best. A conversation might not go the way you hoped, but you can rest easy knowing you spoke with honesty and kindness. The external result is feedback, data to be considered for the next action, but it is not the report card on your character. Your character is judged only by you, based on the intention and virtue you poured into the attempt. This detachment is not a cold, robotic indifference. It is a warm, purposeful commitment to the process itself. It's the artisan who finds joy in the perfect brushstroke, not just the souled painting, the teacher who finds fulfillment in a student's moment of understanding, not just the test score, the leader who is proud of a team that worked with integrity, regardless of the quarterly earnings report. Take a moment to turn this lens on your own life. Bring to mind a task you perform regularly, perhaps at your job, in your home, or for your community. Now, honestly ask yourself, what percentage of your motivation for doing this task comes from a desire for external recognition, a promotion, a compliment, a social media like, the avoidance of criticism? And what percentage comes from a simple, internal sense that it is the right thing to do, and doing it well is its own reward? The goal here isn't to achieve a perfect 100% internal motivation. That's the lifelong practice. The goal is simply to notice the balance. By becoming aware of where we seek validation, we can consciously begin to shift our focus back to the action itself, to the quality of our effort, the integrity of our intention, and the virtue of the deed, finding a deeper and more reliable satisfaction that no outside force can ever give or take away. How do you bounce back from a defeat without losing hope? For a Roman general, a single lost battle could mean the end of his career, the loss of thousands of lives, and a permanent stain on his honor. In the face of such crushing setbacks, despair was a natural reaction, but it was also a luxury a Stoic commander could not afford. Stoicism reframed the very concept of adversity. It was not a punishment to be endured, nor a random stroke of bad luck to be lamented. Instead, the Stoics viewed challenges as the necessary forge for building an unbreakable character. A tree that grows in a sheltered valley may appear healthy, but it is the one battered by constant winds on a mountainside that develops the deepest roots and the toughest wood. In the same way, they believed a person could only discover their true strength and resilience by being tested, by being pushed to their absolute limit, and finding that there was still more within them to give. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and the volatile politics of Emperor Nero's court, wrote extensively on this theme. He argued, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. He saw hardship not as an enemy to be avoided, but as a stern and valuable teacher. A mind that has never been forced to contend with failure remains soft and untested, quick to crumble at the first sign of trouble. But a mind that has stared down defeat, that has processed the pain and learned its lessons, becomes tempered like steel. This perspective allowed a general to experience a military loss not as a final verdict on his ability, but as a brutal yet informative training exercise. The pain was real, but it was not meaningless. It was data. It revealed weaknesses in strategy, gaps in training, or flaws in his own judgment that he could now work to correct. The setback became the foundation for the comeback. We see this philosophy of resilient persistence perfectly illustrated in the early career of Gaius Julius Caesar. During his first major independent campaign in Britain, things went disastrously wrong. His invasion force was smaller than planned, his cavalry transports were scattered by a storm, and the powerful British chariots were a form of warfare his legions had never encountered. After some initial skirmishes, a particularly high tide damaged many of his ships beached on the shore. Caesar found himself in a nightmare scenario, stranded on a hostile island with a damaged fleet, limited supplies, and his line of retreat compromised. A less resilient leader might have panicked or surrendered to despair, but Caesar, drawing on the Stoic mindset that was common among Rome's elite, immediately got to work. He didn't waste energy on regret or blame. He ordered his men to repair as many ships as possible, and those that couldn't be fixed were cannibalized for materials to build a fortified camp. He stabilized the situation, regrouped his forces, and even managed to secure a symbolic victory by forcing several tribes to submit to Rome and provide hostages before he made a disciplined withdrawal back to Gaul. That first invasion was by any strict military measure a failure, but it was a failure that provided invaluable intelligence, hardened his troops, and showed Caesar his own capacity for crisis management. He returned the very next year with a larger, better prepared fleet and a much clearer strategy, leading to a far more successful campaign. The initial adversity didn't break him, it educated him. This ancient understanding of resilience is a powerful tool for navigating our own modern defeats, whether they are professional missteps, personal rejections, or creative projects that fall short of our hopes. The instinct is often to hide from the failure, to shove it away and try to forget the discomfort it caused. But the Stoic approach invites us to lean in and interrogate it. What can this experience teach me about my preparation, my assumptions, or my methods? Where did my plan not account for the unpredictable tides of life? Your past hardships are not just scars, they are a library of wisdom written in the language of experience. Think back to a time you faced a significant challenge, a job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, a goal you fell short of. In the moment, it likely felt like a pure negative. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, can you see the ways in which that difficulty ultimately strengthened you? Did it force you to develop a new skill, reveal a hidden inner fortitude, or redirect you onto a better path you never would have found otherwise? That is the alchemy of Stoic resilience, the ability to look back at the very thing that almost broke you and recognize it as the thing that actually built you. The most powerful leadership is lived, not just spoken. For a Stoic general, virtue was not a set of abstract ideals to be discussed in the safety of a command tent. It was a daily practice to be embodied on the march, in the camp, and on the front line. They understood a fundamental truth of human psychology. People will listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do. A leader who preaches courage but hides from danger, who demands discipline but indulges in comforts, or who speaks of justice but shows favoritism, instantly shreds their own credibility. The Stoics called this the importance of consistent character, a seamless alignment between one's words and actions that builds an unshakable foundation of trust and inspires others not through command but through authentic example. Marcus Aurelius, leading the empire from the front lines of the Marcomannic Wars, constantly reflected on this duty to embody his principles. He wrote in his private meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This was the ultimate distillation of leading by example. It was a command to himself to stop debating philosophy and start living it, to let his actions become the most eloquent argument for his values. For a general, this meant that his integrity was his authority, his self-discipline in adhering to the same strict camp rules as his lowest legionnaire demonstrated fairness. His consistency in rewarding merit and punishing transgression, regardless of rank, proved his commitment to justice. These were not just leadership tactics, they were expressions of a profound inner commitment to virtue that his troops could see, feel, and ultimately choose to follow with unwavering loyalty. A legendary example of this principle is found in the conduct of General Gaius Marius during the grueling campaigns against the Cimbri and Teutones. Marius was a novus homo, a new man without an aristocratic lineage, so his authority rested entirely on his proven competence and character. He was notorious for sharing every hardship of his soldiers. He ate the same simple food, slept on the same hard ground, and marched alongside them laden with his own pack. During the arduous task of constructing a canal to circumvent a river blockade, Plutarch records that Marius was there in the mud and sweat, laboring with his men. This was not a publicity stunt. It was the natural expression of his Stoic-informed belief that a leader should not ask of others what he is unwilling to do himself. By physically sharing their burden, he demonstrated a respect for their labor and a solidarity that no rousing speech could ever match. His men didn't just serve him, they revered him because they saw their own struggles reflected in his actions. This ancient model of leadership translates with piercing clarity into our modern world, whether you're managing a team, raising a family, or guiding a community group. The principle remains unchanged. Your credibility is your currency, and it is minted through daily consistency. People are exquisitely sensitive to hypocrisy. A manager who preaches work-life balance but sends emails at midnight, a parent who demands honesty but tells white lies, a friend who advocates for kindness but engages in gossip. All these small disconnects between word and deed erode trust silently but surely. Conversely, nothing is more powerful or inspiring than seeing someone who truly lives by their own code. It creates a magnetic pull, encouraging others to rise to a higher standard not out of obligation, but out of genuine admiration and a desire to be part of something authentic. So let's bring this from the ancient command tent into your own life. Take an honest moment for self-reflection. Where might there be a gap, however small, between the values you profess and the actions you take? Do you advocate for health but consistently neglect your own? Do you value lifelong learning but haven't picked up a book in months? Do you preach patience but are quick to snap in frustration? Identifying even one of these subtle misalignments isn't about self-criticism. It's about recognizing a powerful opportunity for leadership. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness and intention. By consciously choosing to close just one of those gaps, to better align a single action with a core value, you begin to lead your own life with the integrity of a Stoic general. You stop telling people what to be and you start showing them, and that is how you build an empire of trust, one consistent action at a time. Imagine for a moment that by thinking about your deepest fears, you could actually make them lose their power over you. This is the counterintuitive genius of the Stoic practice known as Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. For a Roman general whose every decision carried immense weight, fear was a constant companion. Fear of ambush, fear of betrayal, fear of bad weather, fear of failure. The Stoics argued that the best way to disarm this fear was not to ignore it or suppress it, but to confront it head-on in the safety of one's own mind long before any crisis arrived. They would systematically visualize the very worst-case scenarios, not as an exercise in pessimism, but as a form of strategic and psychological inoculation. By mentally rehearsing adversity, they stripped it of its element of surprise and its emotional shock value. When a challenge then arose in reality, it felt familiar, almost routine, a situation they had already navigated and survived 100 times in their imagination. This practice transformed anxiety into preparedness. Seneca, a master of this technique, advised, "We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events." Rehearse them in your mind: exile, torture, war, shipwreck. He was not encouraging morbid worry, he was outlining a practical drill. The key distinction is that this mental rehearsal always included the most important component: your reasoned, virtuous response. You wouldn't just imagine your ship sinking, You would visualize yourself calmly finding a piece of wreckage to cling to, encouraging your fellow survivors, and focusing on the next step toward shore. The goal was to move the mind from a state of "what if this happens," which is passive and fearful, to "if this happens, then I will," which is active and empowered. A general using this method would walk through every conceivable disaster on the eve of battle. If the cavalry charge fails, then we will reform the line here. If the left flank breaks, then we have the reserves positioned to plug the gap. If a messenger doesn't arrive, then we operate on this pre-agreed contingency plan. By doing so, he wasn't paralyzed by the multitude of risks. He was liberated by having a prepared response for each one. We can see the power of this principle in the campaign of a general like Lucius Aemilius Paulus during the Third Macedonian War. Facing the formidable phalanx of King Perseus, Paulus knew the terrain, and the enemy's superior numbers posed a significant risk of his army being outmaneuvered and crushed. Rather than hoping for the best, he actively prepared for the worst. He drilled his legions extensively on how to break apart the rigid phalanx formation by fighting in the rough, uneven ground where its strength would become a weakness. He visualized the chaos of the battlefield and prepared his units to operate independently if communications broke down. When the two armies finally met at the Battle of Pydna, the worst did indeed happen initially. The Roman lines were pressured and began to break apart in the rocky terrain. But because Paulus and his officers had premeditated this exact scenario, they didn't panic. They executed the drills they had mentally and physically rehearsed, maneuvering small units into the gaps that appeared in the Macedonian lines. What could have been a rout was turned into a stunning victory because the general had already lived through the crisis in his mind and had a plan ready. This ancient exercise is perhaps one of the most directly applicable Stoic tools for modern life. Our battles may not be against rival armies, but they are no less real. The fear of a layoff, the anxiety before a difficult conversation, the worry about a health diagnosis. Our instinct is to avoid these thoughts, to push them away because they are uncomfortable. But in doing so, we leave ourselves emotionally vulnerable and strategically unprepared for the moment they might actually occur. The Stoic method invites us to lean in. Take a specific fear you have right now. Perhaps it's the possibility of a project at work failing spectacularly. Now set aside 5 minutes to truly premeditate it. Close your eyes and visualize the worst-case outcome in vivid detail. The project is cancelled. Your report is criticized. Feel the initial sting of that disappointment. But then, and this is the crucial part, visualize your own calm and reasoned response. What is the very first thing you would do? Who would you talk to? What is the next step you would take to start addressing the situation? By walking through this mental simulation, you accomplish two things. You realize that even this disaster is survivable, and you have a mental playbook ready to deploy, which immediately reduces the ambient anxiety around the possibility. You haven't attracted the negative outcome. You have simply disarmed its power to terrorize you, granting you the same unshakable composure that allowed a Roman general to sleep soundly on the eve of a decisive battle. How do you ensure the choices you make in a moment of high pressure are the right ones, free from the distorting lens of fear, anger, or pride? For a Stoic general, this was the ultimate application of their philosophy. The chaos of battle was a fertile ground for emotional bias. A rumor of the enemy's strength could seed fear, a personal insult could provoke a reckless charge for revenge, and an early success could breed an overconfidence that led to catastrophic overextension. The Stoic antidote to this was a ruthless and disciplined commitment to reason. They trained themselves to act as impartial judges of a situation, systematically stripping away the emotional noise to examine the bare facts before them. This wasn't about becoming unfeeling robots. It was about creating a necessary firewall between the initial, primal surge of feeling and the final, decisive command. Their goal was to have their actions guided by the cool, clear light of logic rather than the hot, flickering flame of passion. The philosopher Epictetus, whose teachings were essentially a manual for rational living, provided the foundational instruction for this practice. He famously said, "It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments concerning them." He then took this a step further by advising his students to respond to any disturbing impression by saying, "You are but an impression, and not at all the thing you appear to be." This was a mental technique to create instant distance. When a scout reported a massive enemy force, the initial impression was one of terror. A general who succumbed to that impression would make decisions from a place of fear, perhaps retreating prematurely or digging into an overly defensive posture. But a Stoic general would pause and interrogate that impression. He would say to it, "You are just a report, a piece of data. Let me examine your validity." How experienced is this scout? Is this number plausible? What is the terrain? What are my own forces' capabilities? By subjecting the emotional impression to a cross-examination by reason, he could arrive at a calibrated, strategic response rather than a panicked reaction. A brilliant historical example of this Stoic clarity under extreme duress is found in the actions of the Roman general Fabius Maximus during the Second Punic War. After the devastating Roman losses at the battles of Trebia and Lake Trasimene, the collective emotional state of Rome was one of sheer terror in the face of Hannibal's genius. The public and many senators were driven by a passionate desire for immediate, decisive revenge, an emotion that Hannibal expertly counted on to lure them into another trap. But Fabius, appointed dictator, made the profoundly difficult and unpopular decision to refuse a pitched battle. He adopted what became known as the Fabian strategy, shadowing Hannibal's army, harassing his supply lines, and engaging only in small, opportunistic skirmishes. He was mocked and derided with the nickname Cunctator, the Delayer. His strategy was not born from cowardice, but from a rational analysis of the facts. Hannibal was a better tactician on an open field, and his army, though brilliant, was cut off from its home base. Time and attrition were on Rome's side, not Carthage. Fabius had to withstand immense internal pressure driven by emotion, the passion for honor and the thirst for vengeance, and hold fast to the logical course. His disciplined, reason-based strategy, though it cost him his reputation in the short term, saved Rome from almost certain annihilation and provided the crucial breathing room needed to rebuild and eventually defeat Hannibal. He made the right decision, not the emotionally satisfying one. This practice of creating space between impulse and action is a critical skill for our own modern battles, where the stakes might be a business investment, a family conflict, or a personal life choice. We are constantly bombarded with emotional impressions, a sharply worded email that makes us feel disrespected, a piece of bad news that sparks anxiety, a tempting opportunity that triggers greed. The untrained mind immediately converts these feelings into reactions, firing off an angry reply, making a panicked decision, or jumping into a risky venture without due diligence. The Stoic method asks us to install a mental circuit breaker. Think back to a recent decision you made that you later regretted. Perhaps you purchased something expensive in a moment of excitement, ended a relationship in a fit of anger, or committed to a project based on fleeting enthusiasm. Now replay that moment. What if you had imposed a mandatory pause? What if you had interrogated your initial emotional impression by asking a few simple, rational questions? What are the facts of this situation separate from my feelings? What are the potential long-term consequences of each possible action? What would a trusted, dispassionate advisor recommend? By applying this brief protocol, you shift the entire decision-making process from the reactive emotional brain to the reflective logical brain, dramatically increasing the odds of a choice you can stand by with confidence long after the moment has passed. Everything in this world is in a state of constant flux, a river of change where nothing, no matter how solid it seems, remains fixed for long. This is especially true in the theater of war and the broader stage of life, where fortunes can reverse in an instant. For the Stoic general, this wasn't a cause for anxiety. It was a fundamental truth to be embraced. They understood that becoming attached to any single circumstance, whether a glorious victory or a crushing defeat, was a recipe for psychological turmoil. Cling to success, and you set yourself up for the agony of loss when it inevitably fades. Dwell on failure, and you risk being paralyzed by a despair that refuses to acknowledge the possibility of a new dawn. The Stoic practice was to hold all external outcomes lightly, to appreciate them in the moment while maintaining a deep, internal awareness of their temporary nature. This mindset created a profound emotional equilibrium, allowing a leader to ride the highs without becoming arrogant and to endure the lows without being broken by them. Marcus Aurelius, who witnessed the pinnacle of imperial power and the depths of human suffering, constantly meditated on this theme. He wrote in his private journal, a reminder to himself, "Keep in mind that everything you believe exists is already in the process of dissolving and altering, will soon be nothing but myth and then total oblivion." And the same is true of everyone and everything. He wasn't being morbid, he was practicing a form of mental hygiene. By regularly contemplating the impermanence of his own power, his wealth, and even his life, he was vaccinating himself against the intoxicating poison of hubris. It was a daily exercise in humility, a conscious effort to remember that the applause of the crowd, the titles of office, and the monuments built in his honor were all as fleeting as the morning mist. This perspective didn't make his achievements meaningless. It simply placed them in their proper context, freeing him to perform his duty without becoming addicted to the rewards. We see this wisdom embodied powerfully in the figure of Lucius Aemilius Paulus, the general who led Rome to its decisive victory over King Perseus of Macedon at the Battle of Pydna. The triumph he was granted upon returning to Rome was one of the most spectacular in the city's history, a multi-day parade showcasing the vast wealth of the conquered kingdom and the sheer glory of his achievement. In that moment, standing at the absolute peak of his career, showered with adoration, it would have been effortless to believe in his own invincibility, to let the roar of the crowd become the foundation of his identity. But Paulus had studied Stoic philosophy, and he understood the nature of the moment. According to the historian Plutarch, he gathered his own sons and the sons of his late brother, who had died in the war, and spoke to them not of his own glory, but of the fickleness of fortune. He pointed out that a single day, a single shift in the wind, could have changed the outcome entirely. He used his own magnificent triumph as a lesson in humility, teaching the next generation that success is a gift to be grateful for, not a permanent state to be claimed. He enjoyed the celebration, but he did not attach his self-worth to it, and history remembers him not just as a conqueror, but as a man of profound wisdom. This ancient practice of embracing impermanence is a powerful antidote to the roller coaster of modern life, where we are so often encouraged to define ourselves by our latest success or our most recent failure. We chase promotions, relationships, and possessions as if they are endpoints, solid foundations upon which to build a permanent sense of self, and when they inevitably shift, change, or disappear, we feel a sense of existential crisis. The Stoic invitation is to loosen our grip. It is to find our center not in the external things that come and go, but in our own internal character, which is the only thing we truly have sovereignty over. This doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for beautiful things or enjoy our accomplishments. It means we do so with the quiet understanding that they are visitors, not permanent residents in our lives. Take a moment to turn this lens inward. What is one thing in your life right now that you are clinging to, that you secretly hope will last forever and form a core part of your identity? Perhaps it's your current job title, a particular state of your physical health, a financial portfolio, or a specific dynamic in a relationship. Now, gently hold that thought and apply the Stoic reminder: this too is temporary. This is not an exercise in pessimism, it is an exercise in profound liberation. By consciously acknowledging the fleeting nature of that which you hold dear, you accomplish two things. First, you inoculate yourself against the future pain of its potential loss. Second, and more beautifully, you enhance your present appreciation for it. Knowing that a sunny day will end makes you savor the warmth on your skin all the more. Understanding that nothing lasts forever allows you to hold the present moment in all its forms with greater gratitude and less anxiety, freeing you to lead your life with the calm poise of a general who has already seen the tides of fortune turn 1,000 times. How often do we truly pause to examine our own actions and intentions, to hold a mirror up to our day and see ourselves clearly? In the relentless pace of modern life, this kind of introspection can feel like a luxury, but for a Stoic general, it was as essential a part of his daily routine as inspecting his troops or reviewing his battle maps. This practice of rigorous self-reflection, known as the evening review, was a cornerstone of Stoic discipline, a dedicated time to audit the day's events not for what happened to him, but for how he had chosen to respond. It was a quiet, deliberate process of holding oneself accountable, of measuring one's actions against the unwavering standard of virtue, and of extracting the invaluable lessons that only honest self-assessment can provide. Seneca, in his profound letters to his friend Lucilius, championed this practice as the single most important habit for philosophical growth. He wrote, "I make use of this privilege and daily plead my cause before myself. When the lamp is taken out of my sight and my wife, who is now aware of my habit, has become silent, I examine the whole of my day and retrace all my actions and words. I conceal nothing from myself, I pass over nothing." This was not an exercise in self-flagellation or dwelling on mistakes. It was a systematic and calm post-mortem of the day. The Stoic would ask himself a series of pointed questions. Where did I act in accordance with reason and virtue today? Where did I fall short, allowing myself to be governed by anger, fear, or vanity? What external things did I mistakenly treat as good or bad? And most importantly, how can I do better tomorrow? This nightly ritual was the engine of continuous moral improvement, a way to ensure that each day one became slightly more aligned with their highest principles. We can easily envision a Roman commander, perhaps someone like the disciplined and thoughtful Marcus Aurelius himself, performing this ritual in his command tent after a long day of campaigning. The clamor of the camp has settled into a quiet hum. By the light of an oil lamp, he takes out his journal, the very same one that would become the book Meditations. He reviews the decisions he made that day, the positioning of a cohort, the discipline meted out to a soldier, his tone in a strategy meeting with his tribunes. He doesn't just ask if a tactic worked, he asks why he chose it. Was it the most rational option available, or was it influenced by a desire for personal glory or a fear of appearing weak? He examines his interactions with his junior officers. Did he listen with patience and offer clear guidance, or did he dismiss a valid concern out of irritation? This process transforms the raw, often chaotic events of the day into a curated curriculum for self-mastery, ensuring that even a defeat on the field could become a victory in character. This ancient habit of the evening examen is a remarkably simple yet transformative practice you can incorporate into your own life tonight. It requires no special tools, only a few minutes of quiet honesty. Before you sleep, simply ask yourself 3 versions of Seneca's questions. First, what is one thing I did well today? Acknowledge a moment where you were patient, courageous, or kind, reinforcing that positive behavior. Second, where did I miss the mark? Identify a single instance where you reacted poorly, spoke harshly, or acted out of pride, not to punish yourself, but to simply see it clearly and resolve to choose differently next time. And finally, what is one lesson I can carry into tomorrow? This distills the experience into a single, actionable piece of wisdom. This is not about keeping a detailed log of every minute. It's about creating a consistent touchpoint for self-awareness. In doing so, you take command of your own moral and psychological development, building that same inner fortitude that allowed a general to lead thousands by first mastering the one person he truly had authority over, himself. True strength includes compassion, not despite it. This might seem like a paradox in our modern understanding, where we often pit empathy against effectiveness, viewing kindness as a potential liability in tough situations. But for the Stoic general, these qualities were not opposites. They were 2 essential strands woven together to form a complete and effective leader. Stoicism taught that a leader's duty was to the greater good, which required making clear-eyed, rational decisions that sometimes involved immense personal cost and hardship for those under their command. However, this rational duty was always to be exercised with a profound understanding of human dignity and a genuine concern for the well-being of others. It was the ability to feel the weight of a difficult decision deeply, to care for the soldiers who would carry it out, and yet still have the courage to make the call that logic and virtue demanded. This is the delicate balance of compassion without weakness, empathy that informs action rather than paralyzing it. Marcus Aurelius, who bore the ultimate responsibility for the lives of countless citizens and soldiers, constantly grappled with this balance in his private writings. He reminded himself, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." This simple, powerful metaphor captures the Stoic view of compassionate leadership perfectly. A leader's compassion cannot be merely a personal feeling directed at one individual if it harms the collective whole. True compassion, in the Stoic sense, is acting for the good of the entire community, even when that requires making decisions that are painful on an individual level. He also wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself," emphasizing that leadership requires holding oneself to a higher standard of rational duty while extending understanding to others, recognizing their human limitations without being swayed by sentimentality into poor judgment. We find a powerful historical example of this principle in the leadership of Lucius Junius Brutus, one of Rome's first consuls and a foundational figure in the Republic's history. According to legend, his own sons were discovered to be part of a conspiracy to restore the overthrown monarchy. As a father, Brutus undoubtedly felt profound personal anguish and love for his children. Yet, as the chief magistrate of the new republic, his duty was to uphold the law without exception to ensure its survival. In a devastating demonstration of Stoic principle before the philosophy even had a name, Brutus presided over their trial, condemned them, and witnessed their execution. This act was not one of cold-hearted brutality. It was the ultimate sacrifice of personal feeling for the perceived greater good of the state. He showed compassion for the fledgling republic and all its citizens by making the unbearably hard choice he believed would secure its future, proving that decisive action and a deep sense of duty can coexist with a capacity for feeling. This ancient model of balanced leadership is incredibly relevant for anyone in a position of responsibility today, whether you're a manager navigating layoffs, a parent enforcing difficult rules, or a friend offering tough advice. The easy path is often one of two extremes. Either we make the cold, detached decision that ignores human impact, or we avoid the necessary hard choice altogether because we don't want to feel uncomfortable or be disliked. The Stoic path is the more challenging middle way. It requires the emotional intelligence to understand and empathize with the people affected by your decisions, coupled with the moral courage to follow through on what you rationally believe is right. A manager might have to let a well-liked employee go for the financial health of the company and the job security of the remaining team. The compassionate action isn't to avoid the decision, it's to carry it out with dignity, offering clear reasons, genuine respect, and whatever support is possible during the transition. The decision is firm, the execution is kind. Consider your own sphere of influence. Where in your life are you currently facing a situation that demands both kindness and firmness? Perhaps it's setting a necessary boundary with a loved one who is making poor choices, holding a team member accountable for a missed deadline while understanding the pressures they're under, or making a financial decision that is prudent but disappointing to others. The Stoic exercise here is to separate the action from the emotion. You can fully empathize with someone's disappointment or frustration. You can even share in it without allowing that emotion to veto the rational course of action. The firmness is in the decision itself. The compassion is in how you communicate it and support those affected. It's the ability to look someone in the eye, understand their pain, and still hold the line because a greater duty calls. This is not weakness, it is the deepest and most demanding form of strength. This profound shift in focus from the unpredictable outcome to the fully controllable effort was perhaps one of the most liberating mental tools in the Stoic commander's arsenal. The philosophy draws a clear and uncrossable line between what is ours to command and what is not. Our intentions, our judgments, our actions, and our efforts, these belong to us. The final result of any endeavor, however, exists in the realm of external events, influenced by countless variables, chance occurrences, and the actions of others, and is therefore not ours to claim. A general could plan the perfect battle strategy, but he could not control a sudden storm that bogged down his cavalry, a miscommunication that delayed a flanking maneuver, or the sheer luck of an enemy arrow finding its mark. To tie his sense of self-worth, his peace of mind, or his strategic judgment to the outcome was to hand over the keys to his inner citadel to the fickle whims of fortune. Instead, the Stoic general learned to invest his entire being into the quality of his preparation and the virtue of his conduct, and to accept whatever result followed with equanimity. This wasn't a passive resignation. It was an active, courageous commitment to excellence for its own sake, which in turn freed him to act with greater boldness and creativity, unshackled from the paralyzing fear of failure. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood powerlessness intimately, framed this idea with his characteristic stark clarity. He instructed, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This simple directive is a complete manual for a life of reduced anxiety and increased effectiveness. His focus was entirely on the first part of that sentence, making the best use of what is in your power. If a general had done that, if he had exhausted every ounce of his ability in planning, training his men, and making rational decisions in the heat of battle, then the second part, take the rest as it happens, became a simple acceptance of reality, not a personal failure. The outcome, whether victory or defeat, was merely what happened, data to be analyzed for the next campaign, but not a verdict on his character. His character was judged solely by the integrity and excellence of his effort. We see this principle embodied in the campaign of Marcus Atilius Regulus during the First Punic War. Having been captured by the Carthaginians after a defeat, he was sent back to Rome on parole to negotiate a peace treaty or a prisoner exchange. Upon arriving in the Senate, however, Regulus, following his Stoic-informed conscience, shocked everyone by arguing passionately against the terms. He believed the proposed agreement was not in Rome's long-term interest, even though rejecting it meant he was honor-bound to return to Carthage and certain torture and death. He made his argument based solely on its merit and his duty to Rome, fully detached from the horrific personal outcome he knew it would trigger. He could not control how the Senate would vote or how the Carthaginians would react. He could only control the integrity of his counsel. He chose to focus on that effort, performed it to the best of his ability, and accepted the tragic consequences with a calm resolve that became legendary in Roman history. His action was about the purity of the effort, not the desirability of the result. This ancient wisdom directly confronts a central source of modern anxiety, our cultural obsession with results. We are conditioned to believe that a good outcome validates us and a bad one invalidates us. We postpone happiness and self-worth until we hit a specific target, a promotion, a sales goal, a certain number on a scale. This places our inner peace in a future we cannot control, keeping us in a perpetual state of lack. The Stoic approach invites us to reclaim our agency and our peace by shifting the entire goalpost inward. The goal is no longer the promotion. The goal becomes doing your job with such excellence, creativity, and integrity that a promotion would be a natural consequence. The goal is no longer the sales target. It is making every customer interaction helpful and genuine. The goal is not the number on the scale. It is showing up for your health with consistency and care each day. When you make this shift, every single day contains the potential for success because success is redefined as the quality of your effort, which is always available to you. Bring this concept into your own life with a moment of honest reflection. Identify one specific outcome you are currently worried about. Perhaps it's the result of a job application, the success of a creative project you've launched, or the resolution of a difficult conversation you need to have. Now consciously perform the Stoic separation. Clearly define the parts that are within your control, your preparation for the interview, the care and skill you put into your project, the honest and kind words you choose to say. Then define the parts that are not, the hiring manager's final decision, how the public receives your work, how the other person will react. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to pour 100% of your energy and attention into that first category, the effort. Do the work so well that you can be proud of it, regardless of the outcome. By doing so, you disarm the anxiety of the unknown result and find a deep, immediate satisfaction in the one thing you truly command, your own action in the present moment. What does it truly mean to be unshakable from the inside out? To possess a core of mental strength that remains solid no matter how fierce the storm rages outside. For the Stoic general, this inner fortitude wasn't an inherited trait or a lucky accident. It was a form of psychological muscle, deliberately built through daily exercise and disciplined training. They understood that resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship, but about proactively inviting manageable amounts of it into their lives to inoculate themselves against future, unexpected blows. This was the philosophy behind the practice of voluntary discomfort, a conscious decision to temporarily renounce comforts and embrace minor hardships not as a form of self-punishment, but as a strategic drill for the soul. By willingly experiencing lack, they proved to themselves that they could endure it, thereby robbing poverty, hunger, or cold of their power to terrify. This practice transformed potential future sufferings from looming monsters into familiar, manageable challenges they had already conquered. Seneca, a man of immense wealth who nonetheless practiced this Stoic exercise with rigor, explained its purpose with perfect clarity. He advised, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This was a form of mental vaccination. By voluntarily experiencing a simplified version of hardship in a controlled setting, the Stoic was administering a small dose of the very thing they feared, allowing their psychological immune system to build up antibodies against despair. The goal was to move from a theoretical understanding that "I can survive with less" to an embodied, lived certainty of it. This knowledge created an unassailable confidence, a deep-seated knowledge that their well-being was not dependent on external comforts, but was an internal state they could maintain under almost any condition. We can vividly imagine a Roman commander like Cotto the Younger, renowned for his severe Stoic integrity, embodying this principle. Despite his family's wealth and his high office, he consistently chose to live with a stark austerity that mirrored the lowest of his legionnaires. He marched bareheaded in the rain and scorching sun alongside his troops, slept on the hard ground without a tent, and ate the same simple rations of bread and water. These weren't empty gestures for show, they were a continuous training regimen. By voluntarily enduring these discomforts, he was not only building his own resilience, but also proving to his men that the hardships of campaign life were not beneath him. He was demonstrating that his spirit was stronger than his circumstances, and in doing so, he forged an iron will that was immune to bribery, intimidation, or the seductions of luxury. His inner fortitude, built through these daily exercises, made him a man that even his political enemies could not corrupt or bend. This ancient practice of building resilience through voluntary challenge is a tool of immense power that we can apply in our modern lives of relative comfort and convenience. Our world is expertly designed to eliminate discomfort, from climate-controlled homes to instant meal delivery, and while this is a marvel of progress, it can also quietly atrophy our mental resilience. We become so accustomed to ease that the smallest inconvenience, a slow internet connection, a long line at the coffee shop, a minor criticism, can feel like a catastrophic event. The Stoic antidote is to periodically and willingly step away from the comfort. This doesn't mean selling all your possessions and sleeping on the floor, but it does mean intentionally introducing small, manageable doses of hardship into your routine to remind yourself of your own capability. Try taking a cold shower for the last 30 seconds of your morning routine. Walk instead of driving for a short errand, even if the weather isn't perfect. Fast from social media or streaming services for a full 24 hours. Choose the healthier meal option even when you crave something less so. In each of these small acts, you are not practicing self-denial, you are practicing self-command. You are sending a powerful message to your own psyche. I am in charge here. My comfort does not control me. I can choose to endure this, and in doing so, I grow stronger. Each voluntary discomfort is a rep in the gym of your mind, building the inner fortitude you will undoubtedly need when life, as it inevitably does, brings an involuntary challenge to your door. How do you hold onto your ethics when the pressure is on to cut corners, take the easy win, or prioritize victory above all else? For a Stoic general, the answer lay in a relentless commitment to one of the four cardinal virtues: justice. In the brutal, win-at-all-costs environment of ancient warfare, justice was not a soft ideal. It was the bedrock of honorable and effective leadership. It meant a fierce dedication to fairness, integrity, and the rational understanding that one's duty extended beyond mere conquest to how that conquest was achieved. A commander who acted justly built a reputation that could secure peaceful surrenders, inspire unwavering loyalty from his troops, and ensure that the peace that followed victory was stable and enduring. It was the understanding that true strength isn't demonstrated by how much you can take, but by how fairly you act when you have the absolute power to take anything you want. Marcus Aurelius, who wielded more power than almost any other man in history, constantly reminded himself of this solemn duty. He wrote in his Meditations, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." For a leader, this meant that any action that harmed the collective whole, whether that was his army, the empire, or the broader community of humanity, was inherently unjust and therefore irrational and unvirtuous. He also provided a more personal directive for holding the line ethically. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. This simple, powerful maxim served as an internal compass, a filter for every decision and command. It was a commitment to act justly not because others were watching, but because it was the right way to be in the world, regardless of whether anyone else chose the same path. This internalized standard is what allowed a Stoic leader to remain ethical even when operating in the most morally ambiguous and ruthless of environments. A shining historical example of this principle in action is the conduct of Scipio Africanus after his decisive victory over Carthage at the Battle of Zama. Having defeated his legendary rival Hannibal, Scipio held the fate of Carthage in his hands, the common practice of the era, and certainly the desire of many vengeful Romans, would have been to utterly destroy the city, enslave its entire population, and salt the earth so nothing could grow again. Yet Scipio, schooled in Greek philosophy which included Stoic thought, chose a different path. He imposed terms that were remarkably fair and moderate by the standards of ancient warfare. The Carthaginian state was spared total annihilation, though it was disarmed and forced to pay significant reparations. This was not an act of weakness, it was an act of profound strategic wisdom and justice. Scipio understood that a crippled but surviving Carthage could serve as a counterweight to other rising powers in the region, creating a more stable balance of power. He also knew that demonstrating mercy and fairness would make Rome's other enemies more likely to surrender in the future, knowing they could expect reasonable terms. His just treatment of a defeated foe was a calculated policy that secured a lasting peace and cemented Rome's hegemony, proving that integrity and strategic advantage are not mutually exclusive. This ancient commitment to justice under pressure is a litmus test for our own character in far less dramatic but equally meaningful circumstances. We may not be commanding armies, but we constantly face moments where we must choose between what is advantageous and what is right. It might be the temptation to take credit for a colleague's idea when the boss is praising a successful project, knowing a promotion is on the line. It could be the opportunity to win an argument by twisting the truth or omitting a key fact that doesn't support your case. It might be the choice to overlook a supplier's unethical practices because their prices are significantly lower, boosting your profit margin. In these moments, the easy, advantageous path is often clear. The just path requires more courage. It asks us to define success not just by the outcome, but by the integrity of the process used to achieve it. Think back to a recent situation in your own life where you were faced with this exact choice. Perhaps you received too much change from a cashier and had to decide whether to keep it or speak up. Maybe you had the chance to gain a social advantage by sharing a piece of gossip you knew was hurtful and untrue. Or perhaps at work, you saw an opportunity to advance by subtly undermining someone else. Recall the internal tug of war. the voice of advantage is often loud and persuasive, listing all the immediate benefits. The voice of justice is often quieter, a steady whisper speaking of principle, long-term reputation, and the simple peace of mind that comes from knowing you did the right thing. Which voice did you ultimately choose to follow? And more importantly, recognizing that we all stumble, what is one small, upcoming opportunity you can already see where you can make a conscious choice to prioritize fairness, even if it comes with a short-term cost? That conscious choice, practiced consistently, is how you build an inner citadel of character that no external pressure can ever breach. Presence in the midst of chaos isn't just a calming practice, it was a tactical superpower for a Stoic general. While the fog of war swirled around them filled with the din of clashing steel, the frantic reports of scouts, and the ever-present rumors of enemy movements, their ability to anchor their awareness entirely in the present moment was what allowed for clear, decisive command. This wasn't a passive form of meditation. It was an active, disciplined application of attention they called mindfulness in action. The Stoics understood that a distracted mind is a vulnerable mind. Anxiety lives in the future, dwelling on what might go wrong. Regret and resentment live in the past, obsessing over what has already happened. Both states pull a leader's focus away from the only thing that truly exists, the current situation requiring their immediate and full attention. By training themselves to reside completely in the now, they could cut through the noise, assess reality with unclouded judgment, and issue the orders that mattered most. The philosopher Epictetus, whose teachings were a manual for practical living, gave perfectly clear instructions on how to achieve this state of focused presence. He advised, when you are about to undertake some action, remind yourself what kind of action it is. If you are going out for a bath, bring to your mind what happens at a bath: people splashing, jostling, some are rude, others steal your things. This might sound mundane, but it's a profound psychological tool. He wasn't encouraging negativity, he was advocating for radical realism. By mentally preparing for the exact nature of the task at hand, you prevent your mind from being hijacked by unrealistic expectations or surprised by distractions. He continues, and you will undertake the action more effectively if you say to yourself, I want to bathe, and I also want to keep my will in harmony with nature. Apply this to every action. For a general, this meant before a battle, he would remind himself of the chaos, the confusion, the likelihood of bad information. By accepting this reality in advance, he could keep his will, his faculty of judgment, in harmony with nature, meaning aligned with the truth of the moment, not his fantasies or fears about it. His concentration could then remain locked on the immediate task, directing the reserves to the point of greatest pressure, not worrying about the overall fate of the empire. We can see this powerful focus exemplified in a commander like Gaius Marius during the Cimbrian War. Facing a massive tribal force that had previously annihilated Roman armies, the tension and fear in his camp were undoubtedly paralyzing. Rumors would have flown about the enemy's inhuman size and ferocity. A lesser leader might have been consumed by the terrifying stories of past defeats or anxious prophecies of future disaster. But Marius, embodying that stoic presence, ignored the speculative noise. His attention was riveted on the immediate, actionable elements within his control. He focused on drilling his troops relentlessly to perfect a new tactical formation. He personally inspected the fortifications of the camp, ensuring every gate and rampart was sound. He absorbed himself in the logistics of supply lines and the morale of the legionaries directly in front of him. By refusing to let his mind be pulled into the abstract fears of what if, he maintained a razor-sharp focus on the what is. This present moment awareness allowed him to see the tactical opportunity others missed, luring the enemy into an ill-advised attack on his fortified position, which led to one of the most decisive victories in Roman history. His command was effective precisely because his mind was not scattered across time. It was fully invested in the current moment's demands. This ancient discipline is a critical skill in our modern world of infinite distraction, where notifications, news cycles, and endless to-do lists constantly fragment our attention. We are everywhere at once except where we actually are, and this mental diffusion drains our effectiveness and increases our stress. The practice doesn't require a quiet room or 30 minutes of silence. It can be woven into the fabric of your day as a series of small, intentional actions. For the next 5 minutes, choose one single activity and commit to giving it your complete and undivided attention. If you are drinking a cup of coffee, just drink the coffee. Feel the warmth of the mug, notice the aroma, taste the bitterness and the sweetness. When your mind inevitably wanders to a work problem or a social plan, gently guide it back to the sensation of the drink. If you are walking to your car, just walk. Feel the rhythm of your steps, the air on your skin, the sights and sounds around you without layering on a narrative or a judgment. This is not about achieving a blank mind. It's about training your mind to be where your body is. Each time you successfully rein in your wandering attention and bring it back to the present, you are performing a single repetition in the gym of your mind, strengthening your ability to focus under pressure and command the chaos of your own life with the calm clarity of a Roman general on the field. Now, imagine looking at every single event in your life, the unexpected promotions and the sudden layoffs, the joyful reunions and the painful goodbyes, and not just accepting them, but actively embracing them with a full heart. This is the profound Stoic ideal of amor fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of one's fate. It is the radical notion that true peace and power are found not in fighting against the unchangeable currents of life, but in learning to swim with them, to see every twist and turn, every high and low, as a necessary and valuable part of the entire journey. For a Roman general, this philosophy was the ultimate defense against the bitterness and despair that could easily consume a leader after a devastating loss. It allowed him to absorb a defeat not as a personal failure or a cosmic injustice, but as a piece of a larger, divinely ordered mosaic whose full beauty he might not yet be able to perceive. While the phrase amor fati is most famously associated with the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, its spirit is deeply rooted in Stoic thought. Nietzsche wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it." This echoes the core Stoic principle that we explored with the Dichotomy of Control, that we must focus our energy only on what we can change and accept, even love what we cannot. The Stoics believed that the universe was governed by a rational, divine logic, a grand design they called the logos. From this perspective, every single occurrence, no matter how painful, had a purpose and a place within that greater whole. To rage against an event was to rage against the very fabric of reality itself, a futile and exhausting endeavor. To love it was to align oneself with the universe, finding a serene power in that alignment. We can see this profound acceptance in the strategic patience of a general like Quintus Fabius Maximus, whom we met earlier. His strategy of delay and attrition against Hannibal, which earned him the derogatory nickname Cunctator, was a masterclass in amor fati. He accepted the fate that, for the present moment, Hannibal was the superior tactician in open battle. Rather than bitterly insisting on a direct confrontation to satisfy his pride or the public's demand for glory, he loved this difficult fate. He embraced the reality of the situation and built his entire strategy around it, using delay not as a passive surrender but as an active, intelligent tool. He accepted the temporary fate of Roman weakness and used it as the raw material for an eventual victory, trusting in the larger plan for the Republic's survival. His acceptance was not resignation, it was a strategic and spiritual partnership with reality itself. This practice transforms our relationship with life's inevitable difficulties. It asks us to shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "How can this be happening for me? What is this situation trying to teach me or make of me?" A crushing business failure is not just a loss of capital. It is a masterclass in resilience, a brutal but effective teacher that strips away flawed assumptions and forces innovation. A period of ill health is not merely a physical trial. It can be a profound lesson in patience, a reordering of priorities, and a deeper appreciation for well-being once it returns. The Stoic doesn't just white-knuckle their way through these events. They search for the value hidden within them, the way a general would study a defeat to learn the enemy's tactics for the next engagement. By loving our fate, we cease to be victims of circumstance and become active students of our own lives, extracting wisdom and strength from every experience, especially the unwelcome ones. Bring this ancient idea into your own world with a simple but powerful exercise in acceptance. Look around your life right now and identify one single, unavoidable circumstance that you have been resisting. It might be a personality trait you dislike in yourself, a past mistake you can't undo, a current limitation in your resources, or even a global event that causes you anxiety. For just a moment, stop fighting it. Stop wishing it were different. Take a deep breath and try on the mindset of amor fati. Say to yourself, "This is my current reality. This is part of my fate. What if I chose to accept it, not with resentment but with an open heart? What if I decided to find the hidden gift or the necessary lesson within it?" This doesn't mean you approve of injustice or stop striving for a better future. It means you release the exhausting inner struggle against the unchangeable facts of the present, freeing up immense reserves of energy to focus on what you can actually influence: your response, your attitude, and your next move. In that release, you will find a peace that no external circumstance can ever take from you. How do you celebrate a monumental victory without letting it inflate your ego? And how do you process a crushing defeat without letting it shatter your spirit? This is the delicate balancing act that Stoicism mastered, teaching its followers to walk the middle path between the twin perils of hubris and despair. For a Roman general, the emotional whiplash of warfare could be extreme, one day hailed as a savior by the entire republic, the next facing political ruin from a single lost battle. The Stoic answer to this volatility was not to feel nothing, but to develop an unshakable internal compass that remained steady regardless of external praise or criticism. They learned to receive applause with a quiet skepticism and to absorb blame with a calm resilience, understanding that both were fleeting impressions, not ultimate truths about their character. This equilibrium wasn't a denial of emotion. It was the achievement of a profound emotional maturity that kept them grounded and effective through every twist of fate. Marcus Aurelius, who experienced the highest highs and lowest lows of human experience from his imperial throne, constantly meditated on this balance. He provided the essential mental framework for it, writing in his private journal, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." This simple directive was a complete guide to navigating success and failure. He also delved deeper into the nature of public opinion, noting, "The applause of the crowd means nothing. It is as fickle as the wind. Today they cheer you, tomorrow they condemn you. Your character cannot be measured by their praise or their blame. His wisdom was to constantly remind himself that his worth was not determined by the roar of the mob in the forum, but by the quiet integrity of his own actions and intentions. This internal grounding allowed him to accept the accolades for military victories without believing he was a god, and to endure the frustrations of the Marcomannic Wars without believing he was a failure. His self-worth was decoupled from outcomes, anchored instead in his virtuous effort. A powerful historical example of this Stoic balance is found in the conduct of Lucius Aemilius Paulus, the general who defeated King Perseus of Macedon. As we discussed earlier, his triumph in Rome was one of the most spectacular ever seen, a multi-day celebration of his unmatched victory. In that moment, with the entire city chanting his name, it would have been effortless to succumb to the intoxicating belief in his own greatness. Yet Paulus, a student of philosophy, understood the fleeting nature of it all. According to the historian Plutarch, he gathered his family around him during the height of the celebration. Instead of basking in the glory, he used the moment as a profound lesson in humility. He spoke to his sons about the fickleness of fortune, reminding them that the same goddess who had lifted him so high could just as easily bring him low. He pointed out that a single different decision, a shift in the weather, or a stray arrow could have altered the day's outcome entirely. By consciously contextualizing his success within the larger, unpredictable flow of events, he prevented the victory from going to his head. He accepted the honor with grace but refused to be defined by it, demonstrating the perfect Stoic balance of grateful acceptance without arrogant attachment. This ancient wisdom offers us a crucial lens through which to view our own modern achievements and setbacks. Our triumphs may not involve conquering kingdoms, but they are no less potent in their ability to distort our self-perception. A promotion, a successful product launch, or a social media post that goes viral can all trigger a surge of pride that, if left unchecked, can curdle into arrogance. We start to believe our own press, attributing our success solely to our own brilliance while downplaying the role of luck, timing, and the support of others. Conversely, a professional rejection, a failed project, or a personal criticism can send us into a spiral of self-pity, making us believe we are fundamentally inadequate. The Stoic practice is to consciously reject both of these false narratives. After a success, take a moment to genuinely acknowledge the factors outside your control that contributed: the market conditions, the team that supported you, the sheer luck of being in the right place at the right time. After a failure, conduct a clear-eyed analysis of what you can learn, but firmly separate the outcome from your core worth as a person. Bring this practice into your own life with a moment of honest reflection. Think back to a significant success you've experienced, whether in your career, your personal life, or a hobby. Now try to view it through the eyes of a Stoic like Paulus. Can you identify the elements of fortune or external support that played a role? How did you ensure that the accomplishment didn't alter your humility or your treatment of others? Perhaps you made a point to thank your collaborators, or maybe you simply took a private moment to acknowledge that the same effort might not have yielded the same result on a different day. This isn't about diminishing your achievement, it's about placing it in its proper context, which actually makes your success more sustainable. By understanding that victory is always a collaboration between effort and circumstance, you protect yourself from the arrogance that can alienate others and blind you to future risks, allowing you to remain grounded, grateful, and ready for whatever challenge comes next. Sometimes the most powerful action a commander can take is to choose not to act at all. In a world that often equates movement with progress and speed with competence, the Stoic virtue of strategic patience stands as a profound counterintuitive truth. For a Roman general, this was not a passive surrender to events. but an active, disciplined form of engagement, a conscious decision to hold back, to observe, and to allow time itself to become an ally. They understood that impulsive action, driven by the hunger for immediate results or the fear of appearing indecisive, was often the quickest path to catastrophe. True strength in the Stoic view lay in the ability to master one's own urgency, to resist the temptation of the quick and easy solution, and to wait for the moment when action would be most effective. This was patience not as weakness, but as a form of concentrated power, a coiled spring gathering potential energy for the perfect release. Seneca, who advised the Emperor Nero and witnessed the destructive consequences of rash decisions, wrote extensively on the critical importance of timing and deliberation. He observed, "Every great example of punishment has in it some injustice, but the harm to the public is made up for by the greatness of the precedent." While speaking of justice, this insight cuts to the heart of strategic patience. Sometimes a short-term injustice or discomfort must be accepted to achieve a greater, long-term good. In a more direct sense, he counseled, "There is a great difference between living and acting. Some men are merely keeping busy while others are truly living." The Stoic general sought to act, not just to be busy. He valued purposeful, decisive movement over frantic activity that drained resources and achieved nothing. This required the wisdom to distinguish between a true opportunity and a mere distraction, a skill honed through disciplined reflection and a deep understanding of the broader strategic picture. The ultimate historical embodiment of this principle is found, once again, in the strategy of Quintus Fabius Maximus during the Second Punic War. Faced with the military genius of Hannibal, who had already humiliated Rome in 3 devastating battles, the emotional and political pressure for a swift, decisive confrontation was overwhelming. The Roman people and many senators, driven by wounded pride and a thirst for vengeance, demanded immediate action. They derided Fabius's cautious approach, giving him the mocking nickname Cunctator, the delayer. But Fabius possessed the Stoic fortitude to withstand this criticism. He recognized that Hannibal's strength lay in his tactical brilliance on an open battlefield. Engaging him directly on his terms was to play to his greatest strength, so Fabius chose a different path. He shadowed Hannibal's army across Italy, always positioning his forces on high ground, harassing supply lines, and engaging only in small, opportunistic skirmishes. He refused to be drawn into the grand, decisive battle that Hannibal sought. This strategy of attrition, of patiently starving the enemy of victory itself, was deeply frustrating to a martial culture built on honor and direct confrontation. Yet it was this very patience that saved Rome. Fabius's strategy drained Hannibal's army, prevented further catastrophic defeats, and bought the Republic the precious time it needed to recover its strength and eventually produce generals like Scipio Africanus who could meet Hannibal on equal terms. Fabius won the war not by winning a battle, but by strategically not losing it until the conditions were right. This ancient lesson in strategic waiting holds immense power for our modern lives, which are so often characterized by a frantic rush for instant gratification. We feel compelled to immediately respond to every email, seize every apparent opportunity, and react to every piece of news, often without taking the time to discern if action is even the most prudent course. We confuse motion for progress. The Stoic art of patience invites us to reintroduce a vital space between stimulus and response, to ask not just "what can I do?" but "is now the right time to do it?" Perhaps it's patiently nurturing a skill for years before expecting mastery, instead of jumping from one pursuit to another when results aren't immediate. Maybe it's refusing to escalate a heated argument, choosing to let emotions cool before seeking a resolution, understanding that words spoken in haste can cause wounds that take far longer to heal. It could be in holding off on a significant financial investment until you have thoroughly done your research, resisting the fear of missing out that so often leads to poor decisions. Consider your own current challenges. Where in your life are you feeling a sense of urgency that might be clouding your judgment? Is there a relationship you're trying to force, a career move you're rushing into out of impatience, or a personal goal you're pursuing with such haste that you're missing the important lessons along the way? Strategic patience asks you to pause and consider the power of intentional inaction. What if, instead of pushing harder, you decided to observe, to learn, and to wait for the situation to develop? What if the most effective step you can take right now is to simply give something, a project, a conversation, a dream, the time and space it needs to ripen naturally? By mastering the impulse to constantly do, you unlock the far greater power of knowing precisely when to act. How do you find a flicker of light when everything around you seems shrouded in darkness? For a Roman general on a prolonged campaign, facing harsh weather, supply shortages, and the constant specter of death, the conditions were perfect for bitterness and complaint to take root. Yet, it was precisely in these moments of extreme deprivation that the Stoic practice of gratitude became their most powerful psychological shield. This was not a simple "thank you." It was a profound and disciplined exercise in perspective shifting, a conscious recalibration of the mind to focus on what remained rather than what was lacking. By actively cultivating thankfulness for the loyalty of their troops, for the simple fact of being alive, or even for the strength to endure another day, these commanders fortified themselves against the corrosive sense of entitlement that could undermine leadership and the despair that could break an army's spirit. Marcus Aurelius, commanding legions from the freezing front lines of the Danube, constantly practiced this form of mental armor. In the midst of what we can only imagine were grueling and bleak conditions, he penned this reminder to himself in his private journal: "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave for them if they were not yours." This is the essence of Stoic gratitude. It's a deliberate act of comparison, not to those who have more, but to a hypothetical state of having less. It's the practice of imagining life without the very things you might take for granted: your health, your comrades, your next meal, and in doing so, instantly transforming those ordinary blessings into extraordinary gifts. This mindset wasn't about ignoring very real hardships. It was about preventing those hardships from dominating the entire mental landscape, ensuring that appreciation held equal footing with adversity. We can picture a commander like Marius during the difficult Cimbrian campaigns employing this practice. After a long march through hostile territory, his men would be exhausted, cold, and hungry. The easy, default response would be to focus on the discomfort, to complain about the rations, the weather, or the high command back in Rome. But a Stoic leader would consciously shift the focus. He might gather his centurions and express genuine gratitude for the discipline they maintained on the march, which prevented ambushes. He might walk among the legionaries and thank them for their unwavering loyalty, acknowledging that their shared sacrifice was the only thing standing between Rome and annihilation. He might even, in the privacy of his own tent, practice a personal gratitude for his own still beating heart and the strength to lead. This wasn't empty positivity. It was a strategic reinforcement of the army's morale and his own resolve, reminding everyone of the core strengths they still possessed, even in the face of lack. This ancient discipline is a tool we can wield with immense effect in our own modern lives, which, despite their comforts, are often filled with a low-grade hum of complaint and a focus on what's missing. We scroll through social media and feel a lack compared to others' curated highlights. We fixate on the one critical comment amidst a sea of praise. we obsess over the minor inconvenience and completely overlook the fundamental blessings of our existence. The Stoic practice of gratitude is the antidote to this scarcity mindset. It doesn't ask you to pretend your problems don't exist. It simply asks you to balance the ledger of your attention by actively noting the good that exists alongside them. So let's put this into practice right now, moving from the ancient world to your own. Think about your day to day. It doesn't have to be a perfect day. In fact, it's better if it isn't. Now, bring to mind 3 specific things you are genuinely grateful for in this moment. They don't have to be grand. Perhaps it's the warm cup of coffee you had this morning, the reliable function of your computer that allows you to work or connect with others, or the simple fact that you woke up with breath in your lungs and a new day of possibilities ahead of you. The act of consciously identifying and naming these things, however small, performs a subtle but powerful alchemy in your mind. It shifts your locus of control, reminding you that even when external events are difficult, you still retain the power to choose where you direct your focus. By regularly counting your blessings, you are not ignoring life's storms. You are simply building a stronger shelter from within. Everyone feels fear. It's a universal human experience, as familiar to a Roman general standing before his legions as it is to any of us facing a difficult conversation or a daunting challenge. Stoicism never demanded the elimination of fear. That would be both impossible and inhuman. Instead, it redefined courage not as the absence of fear, but as the quality of your response to it. Bravery, in the Stoic view, is a conscious choice, a decision to act in accordance with your principles and duties, even when every instinct screams for retreat. It's the understanding that fear is simply an impression, a powerful one to be sure, but one that you have the ultimate authority to either obey or override through the exercise of your rational will. This transforms courage from a mythical trait possessed by a special few into a practical discipline available to anyone willing to practice it. The philosopher Epictetus, who understood hardship intimately, framed this choice with his characteristic clarity. He taught, "He who is brave is free." This simple statement contains a profound truth. The person who acts despite their fear is not free from the sensation of fear itself, but they are free from its tyranny. They are no longer a slave to their own physiology, compelled to flee or freeze by a rush of adrenaline. Their freedom lies in that critical gap between the feeling and the action, where reason and virtue can intervene and choose the right path. Epictetus further instructed his students to confront challenging impressions by saying, "If it is to be, then it is up to me to meet it." This is the Stoic call to ownership. The situation may be frightening, but your response to it is your responsibility and your opportunity to demonstrate character. We can see this philosophy embodied in the command of a general like Gaius Julius Caesar, particularly during his fateful crossing of the Rubicon River. This was not merely a geographical boundary. It was the legal line that, once crossed with an army, meant irrevocable civil war against the Roman Senate and Pompey's legions. The historical sources suggest Caesar paused, weighing the immense consequences. He knew the fear his soldiers felt, and he undoubtedly felt it himself: fear of failure, of being branded a traitor, of leading his loyal men to their deaths. He acknowledged this fear openly, reportedly saying the die is cast not as a boast, but as a solemn acceptance of the point of no return. His courage wasn't the absence of doubt, it was the decision to move forward despite it, trusting his judgment and accepting the full weight of the consequences. He led the charge not as a fearless superhero, but as a man who had made a conscious choice to act in pursuit of what he believed was necessary. Fear be damned. This redefinition of courage is incredibly empowering for our own lives. We often wait for fear to subside before we take action, believing that courage is a feeling we must first attain. We put off the difficult conversation, delay launching the project, or avoid the unfamiliar situation, waiting for a sense of confidence that may never come. The Stoic approach flips this entirely. It tells us that the feeling of confidence comes after the courageous action, not before it. You don't need to feel brave to act bravely. You simply need to act, and the bravery is inherent in that very action. The fear might never go away, but it becomes a background hum, a familiar companion on the journey rather than the roadblock that ends it. So bring this ancient lesson into your modern moment. Identify one specific fear that is currently holding you back from something you know you need to do. Perhaps it's the fear of rejection that keeps you from applying for a new role, the fear of awkwardness that prevents you from mending a relationship, or the fear of failure that stops you from sharing your creative work. Now, rather than trying to argue the fear away or waiting for it to vanish, make a different choice. Decide on one small, tangible, courageous action you can take today that moves you directly toward that fear. It doesn't have to be the entire journey, just the very next step. Send the email, make the call, write the first sentence. Your heart may still be pounding, that's fine. The pounding heart isn't the absence of courage, it's the very field upon which courage is earned. By taking that action, you are not proving you are unafraid. You are proving that your values and your purpose are more powerful than your fear. How can we be strong alone but stronger together? This question lies at the heart of a seemingly paradoxical aspect of Stoicism. While the philosophy emphasizes self-reliance and inner fortitude, it never advocates for isolation. In fact, the Stoics held a profound belief in the inherent interconnectedness of all people, arguing that our rational nature is social by design. For a Roman general, this was a practical reality as much as a philosophical principle. His success, and indeed his survival, depended entirely on the intricate web of trust, counsel, and mutual support he cultivated with his officers, his troops, and even the communities he sought to protect. He may have borne the ultimate responsibility alone, but he understood that the weight of command was distributed across the shoulders of every single person in his army. His individual strength was magnified 1,000-fold through the collective strength of the community he led. Marcus Aurelius, who often wrote in solitude, constantly returned to this theme of our shared humanity. He reminded himself, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This beautiful metaphor captures the Stoic view perfectly. The individual's well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the collective. A general who acted solely for his own glory, disregarding the welfare of his soldiers, would ultimately harm himself by weakening the very army that was his source of strength. In another passage, he writes, "We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another then is contrary to nature." This wasn't a sentimental plea for kindness. It was a statement of fact based on the Stoic understanding of the universe's rational order. To go it alone, to reject the counsel and support of others, was to act irrationally and against one's own nature. We see this principle in action with a commander like Scipio Africanus. Before his decisive campaign against Hannibal in Africa, Scipio didn't retreat into a tent to devise strategy in isolation. He was renowned for actively seeking counsel from a diverse group of advisors, including experienced centurions, local allies, and even his sharpest critics. He understood that his perspective was limited and that the collective intelligence of his war council was far greater than his own. He built a community of trust where junior officers felt safe to voice dissenting opinions, knowing their commander valued truth over flattery. This practice of collaborative decision-making wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a strategic application of Stoic wisdom, ensuring that his plans were tested, refined, and strengthened by multiple minds before being put into action. His legendary victory was not a solo achievement but the culmination of a collective effort he had the wisdom to foster. This ancient understanding of community offers a vital correction to a modern misconception of Stoicism as a cold, hyper-individualistic philosophy. It reminds us that building our inner citadel doesn't mean bricking ourselves up inside it. True resilience is not about never needing help. It's about having the humility to ask for it and the strength to offer it. Our own battles, whether in the office, at home, or within ourselves, are rarely won alone. We need trusted advisors to challenge our blind spots, supportive friends to bolster our courage when it wanes, and a team to share the load when it becomes too heavy to carry by ourselves. The Stoic general teaches us that the most powerful leaders are those who create ecosystems of mutual support, where everyone is both a teacher and a student, both a supporter and someone who needs support. Take a moment to turn this insight inward and make it personal. Look around your own life at the communities you are part of, your family, your colleagues, your circle of friends. Now ask yourself two simple questions born from this Stoic ideal. First, who is one person in your life you could actively seek support or counsel from regarding a challenge you're currently facing? Admitting you don't have all the answers is not a failure of self-reliance. It is the height of rational action. And second, who is one person you could proactively offer support to today? It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. A simple check-in, a genuine offer of help, or just a listening ear can be a powerful act of Stoic fellowship. In asking for support, you practice humility and strengthen your connections. In offering it, you fulfill your role in the interconnected hive, making yourself stronger by making those around you stronger too. Imagine staring at a map not of a single battlefield, but of an entire empire in crisis, with multiple enemy armies on the move, supply lines stretched to breaking, and political pressure mounting from a nervous Senate 1,000 miles away. The sheer scale and complexity of such a situation could easily paralyze even the most experienced leader. This is where the Stoic genius for simplification became a critical command tool. The philosophy offered a powerful mental model. A big problem is not a single, monstrous entity to be slain all at once. It is merely a collection of smaller, more manageable problems added together. The overwhelming whole becomes conquerable the moment you stop trying to face it all at once and instead break it down into its constituent parts, dealing with each piece systematically with your full focus. This practice of decomposition was how a Stoic general transformed an insurmountable crisis into a series of solvable puzzles. Seneca, in his letters, provided the essential blueprint for this approach, advising, "We should not tackle our problems all at once, for so we shall only faint and weary ourselves without effect. Rather, let us divide and conquer them, taking them one by one." This is the ancient root of a very modern productivity concept, but for the Stoics, it was far more than a time management trick. It was a vital strategy for preserving mental clarity and effective action in the face of chaos. The general's primary battlefield was often his own mind, and the greatest threat was the cognitive overload that led to panic and poor judgment. By consciously choosing to focus only on the single, immediate task directly in front of him, the next march, the next meal for the troops, the next reconnaissance report, he could keep the terrifying bigger picture at bay, trusting that the sum of these correct, small actions would eventually resolve the larger strategic situation. We can see this principle in action during Julius Caesar's famed Gallic Wars. The campaign was not a single event but a sprawling, 7-year-long ordeal involving dozens of distinct tribes, unfamiliar terrain, and a constant juggling of military, logistical, and political challenges. At any given moment, Caesar faced the potential for a multi-front disaster. His Stoic trained response was to never try to fight the entire war at once. He would identify the most immediate and pressing threat, perhaps the Helvetii migration that required immediate intervention, or the uprising of the Nervii that threatened a specific legion. He would then focus the entirety of his resources and intellect on that single objective, temporarily ignoring other fronts through strategic alliances or defensive positioning. Once that issue was resolved, he would calmly turn his attention to the next problem on the list. He didn't allow the anxiety of what was happening elsewhere to distract him from the task directly at hand. He simplified the complex whole by dealing with it one piece at a time, a practice that allowed him to control a vast territory with a surprisingly small force. This ancient technique is perhaps one of the most directly applicable Stoic tools for managing the complexity of modern life. We may not be commanding legions, but we face our own overwhelming campaigns. A massive project at work with 100 moving parts, the compounding stresses of personal finances and family obligations, or a major life goal that seems too distant to ever reach. Our instinct is to look at the mountain in its entirety and feel immediately exhausted before we've even taken a single step. The resulting anxiety can lead to paralysis, where we avoid starting altogether because the scale of the endeavor is just too daunting. The Stoic method is to put the mountain out of your mind entirely and focus only on the path directly in front of your feet. Take a moment to apply this to a current challenge in your own life. Identify one thing that feels complex, overwhelming, or unmanageable. Now, take out a piece of paper or open a new document and perform the Stoic exercise of decomposition. Break that one big problem down into its absolute smallest, most actionable components. If the problem is get in shape, the first step is not work out for an hour every day. That's still too vague and easy to avoid. The real first step is research 3 local gyms tonight, or schedule a 30-minute walk for tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. If the problem is overhaul the company website, the first step is not design new website. It's email the team to schedule a 15-minute brainstorming session this week. The goal is to reduce the problem to a step so small and concrete that it feels impossible not to do it. By completing that one tiny action, you build momentum and create a new, slightly simpler problem to solve next. You are not climbing the whole mountain, you are simply taking the very first step, and then the next, and then the next. This is how the most complex campaigns are won, not by a single, heroic effort, but by the relentless, disciplined execution of 1,000 small, simple actions. What invisible weight are you carrying right now that serves no purpose other than to drain your energy and cloud your judgment? For a Stoic general, the ability to march forward effectively depended not just on the strength of his legions, but on the lightness of his own mind. They understood that clinging to past failures or agonizing over future uncertainties was a form of mental baggage that could cripple a leader's capacity to respond to the present moment with clarity and purpose. The art of letting go was, for them, not a spiritual abstraction but a critical tactical skill, a deliberate process of mental decluttering to ensure that their cognitive and emotional resources were fully available for the challenges directly in front of them. This practice was about systematically releasing their grip on the unchangeable past and the unpredictable future, creating a spaciousness in the mind where rational thought and decisive action could flourish. The philosopher Epictetus, whose teachings were a guide to mental freedom, provided the essential framework for this practice. He drew a clear, uncrossable line in the sand of the mind, stating, "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but only 'I have given it back.'" This simple shift in language is a profound psychological tool. It reframes loss not as a permanent state of lack, but as a temporary stewardship that has now come to its natural end. His most famous instruction on the matter cuts even deeper. Do not be disturbed by things over which you have no control. For a general, this meant that once a battle was concluded, its outcome belonged irrevocably to the past, a realm firmly outside his control. To continue agonizing over a lost skirmish, second-guessing his decisions, or lamenting the soldiers who had fallen was not dedication. It was a form of self-inflicted disturbance that impaired his ability to command effectively in the next engagement. The Stoic art of letting go was the disciplined choice to learn the lesson and then release the emotional weight, to accept the return of what was never permanently theirs to hold. We can see this principle in action after the catastrophic Roman defeat at the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal's tactics encircled and annihilated a massive consular army. The generals who survived, such as Varro and Paulus, faced not only a military disaster but a profound personal and political shame. The temptation to be consumed by guilt, to endlessly replay their decisions in search of a different outcome, must have been overwhelming. Yet the Stoic-informed response, which the Roman Republic itself embodied, was to learn from the tactical lessons of the defeat, the dangers of overly deep formations, the brilliance of Hannibal's envelopment, and then to let the emotional devastation of it go. They did not purge Varro from public life. Instead, they thanked him for not having despaired of the Republic. This was a collective act of letting go. The focus immediately shifted from the unchangeable past to the actionable present, raising new legions, adjusting their entire military doctrine, and finding new generals like Scipio who could apply the hard-won lessons without being haunted by the ghost of the lost. They honored the dead by building a smarter, more resilient future, not by dwelling in the grave of the past. This ancient practice is a vital skill for navigating the constant stream of minor regrets and anxieties that characterize modern life. Our minds are often cluttered with the mental equivalent of old battlefields, a harsh word spoken in a meeting yesterday, a missed opportunity from last year, or a worry about a presentation that's still weeks away. Each of these thoughts, however small, consumes a slice of our attention and emotional energy, leaving less available for the task immediately at hand. The art of letting go is the conscious decision to perform a mental inventory and deliberately release what no longer serves you. It is the understanding that holding onto a past mistake does not demonstrate your dedication. It only ensures that you will bring a diminished version of yourself to your next challenge. So bring this Stoic audit into your own mind. Take a quiet moment and ask yourself, what is one thing I am mentally carrying right now that I have the power to put down? Perhaps it's the resentment over a colleague's comment that you've replayed 100 times, the anxiety about a future event you cannot control, or the guilt over a parenting decision you wish you could take back. Identify it clearly, then apply the wisdom of Epictetus. Acknowledge that this thought belongs to the past or the future realms beyond your control. Thank it for any lesson it might have offered, and then consciously choose to release your grip on it. You are not erasing the event from history. You are simply freeing up the mental real estate it was occupying. This act of mental decluttering is not a one-time event, but a daily practice of choosing presence over preoccupation, ensuring that your command post, your mind, remains clear, unburdened, and fully ready for whatever the present moment demands. Knowing what to do is profoundly different from doing what is right. A brilliant strategist can memorize every terrain feature, calculate the precise trajectory of a ballista shot, and recite the entire history of military engagements, yet still make a catastrophic ethical lapse that costs him the loyalty of his men and the integrity of his command. For the Stoic general, this distinction was everything. They prized what the ancients called phronsis, practical wisdom, over the mere accumulation of facts. Intelligence is the raw data, the map of the world. Wisdom is the moral compass that tells you how to navigate that map, whom to trust on the journey, and what destination is truly worth reaching. It is the fusion of knowledge with virtue, the application of experience with an unwavering commitment to justice, courage, and temperance. A leader armed only with knowledge is a dangerous weapon without a guidance system. A leader guided by wisdom becomes a force for good, regardless of the tools at their disposal. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who spent decades wrestling with the immense burden of command, constantly returned to this theme in his private writings. He drew a clear line between intellectual cleverness and true understanding, noting, "A man must be upright, not kept upright." In this simple, powerful statement, he captures the essence of the Stoic view. Knowledge can be given to you, it can be learned from a scroll or a teacher, but wisdom must be cultivated from within. It is an internal state of character that allows you to stand firm on your own principles, not because an external rulebook tells you to, but because your own rational judgment and moral compass demand it. He further warned against the hollow pursuit of intellect without purpose, writing, "Stop letting your mind be a slave, to be jerked about by selfish impulses, to kick against fate and the present, or to suspect the future." For Marcus, a mind filled with knowledge but ruled by passion and fear was still a slave. The wise mind, by contrast, is a free mind. It uses knowledge as a tool in the service of virtue, not as an end in itself. The Roman Republic itself provided a powerful historical example of this principle in action when it appointed Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus as dictator. Cincinnatus was not chosen for his encyclopedic knowledge of siege warfare or his brilliant oratory. He was a simple farmer, living a life of austere virtue on his small plot of land. What the Senate sought in him was not brilliance but judgment. They needed a leader whose character was so unshakably grounded in duty, integrity, and practical wisdom that he could be trusted with absolute power with the absolute certainty that he would relinquish it the moment the crisis was over. And that is precisely what he did. Cincinnatus accepted the command, led the Roman army to a swift and decisive victory over the Equians, and then, just 16 days later, immediately resigned his supreme authority and returned to his plow. His wisdom lay in his understanding that true leadership is stewardship, not ownership. He possessed the practical know-how to win a battle, but more importantly, he possessed the moral wisdom to know that power is a temporary tool for the public good, not a personal possession to be hoarded. The Roman state didn't need the most knowledgeable man for the job. It needed the wisest. This ancient distinction between knowledge and wisdom is critically relevant in our modern information age, where we are drowning in data but often starved for understanding. We have access to more facts, opinions, and instructions than any generation in history, yet we can still feel paralyzed when faced with a complex ethical dilemma or a decision that has no clear right answer. Knowledge can tell you the legal ramifications of a business decision, but only wisdom can guide you to the choice that is both legal and right. Knowledge can provide you with a dozen different parenting techniques from experts, but only wisdom can tell you which one to use in a moment of frustration to connect with your child rather than simply control them. The Stoic general reminds us that collecting information is only the first step. The real work is in developing the character to use that information wisely. Reflect for a moment on a decision you faced where the right course of action wasn't clear-cut, where the facts alone were insufficient. Perhaps it was a situation at work where you had to choose between maximizing profit for your department and protecting the well-being of your team. Maybe it was a personal crossroads where a logical path forward was obvious, but your intuition told you it was the wrong one for your long-term happiness. In that moment, you were called upon to exercise wisdom. What was the guiding principle that ultimately led your choice? Was it a commitment to fairness over advantage? Was it a value like courage that pushed you to have a difficult conversation you wanted to avoid? That internal negotiation, that alignment of your action with a deeper virtue, is where knowledge is forged into wisdom. It is the daily practice of choosing what is right over what is easy, what is meaningful over what is merely efficient, that builds the unshakable judgment of a true leader, whether on an ancient battlefield or in a modern life. What kind of mark do you truly want to leave on the world when you are gone? For the Stoic general, this was not a question of ego or a desire for fame carved into stone. It was the central, guiding question of a life well lived. In a culture that celebrated military triumphs and monumental building projects, the Stoics proposed a radical alternative for measuring a person's worth. They argued that the only legacy that matters, the only thing that is truly permanent in a world of constant flux, is the quality of your character. Military victories fade as empires rise and fall, wealth is dispersed and forgotten, and even the grandest monuments eventually crumble into dust. But a legacy of integrity, courage, justice, and wisdom, this is something that time cannot erode. It lives on in the lives you've touched, the examples you've set, and the virtuous choices that become a part of the story others tell about you long after your name is spoken for the last time. This was the ultimate investment for a Stoic, not in temporary external achievements, but in the eternal internal architecture of a virtuous soul. Seneca, in his profound letters, wrestled with this very idea of legacy, urging his readers to look beyond the superficial markers of a successful life. He wrote, "You are afraid of death, but come now, how is this life of yours anything but a form of death?" This shocking statement was not meant to be morbid, but to jolt his reader into a realization. A life spent chasing applause, wealth, or power, all things that vanish at death, is a life already lost to the things that do not last. He continues with a more constructive vision, advising, "So you must not think a man has lived long because he has white hair and wrinkles. He has not lived long, he has just existed long. For suppose you should think that a man had had a long voyage who had been caught in a raging storm as he left harbor, and carried hither and thither, and driven round and round in a circle by the rage of opposing winds. He did not have a long voyage, he was just tossed about for a long time. For Seneca, a true life, a life worth remembering, was not measured in years, but in the depth of its virtue and the purpose of its journey. A long life spent in a storm of passion and trivial pursuit was a wasted voyage, while a shorter life lived with principle and clarity was a monumental success. We see this philosophy embodied in the historical memory of a figure like Cato the Younger. Cato was a staunch Stoic and a senator who fiercely opposed the rise of Julius Caesar, believing him to be a threat to the Roman Republic. When Caesar ultimately emerged victorious in the Civil War, Cato found himself on the losing side of history, faced with the choice of living under what he saw as a tyrant's rule or ending his own life. He chose the latter, a final act of defiance that was entirely consistent with his principles. Now, here is the fascinating part of his legacy. Julius Caesar won everything. He achieved more military conquests, accumulated more power, and built a larger name for himself than Cato could ever have dreamed of. Yet, in the centuries that followed, it was Cato, the man who lost, who was held up by philosophers and writers as the ultimate exemplar of republican virtue and unwavering integrity. His legacy was not one of territory conquered or battles won, but of character demonstrated under the most extreme pressure. He was remembered not for what he had, but for who he was. His defeat on the battlefield was utterly irrelevant next to his victory in living and dying by his code. This ancient perspective on legacy challenges the very foundation of how we often measure our own lives. We are conditioned to chase the external validators, the job title, the size of our home, the number of followers, the public recognition. There is nothing inherently wrong with these things, but the Stoic asks us a piercing question. If all of that were stripped away tomorrow, what would be left? What is the core of you that exists independent of your possessions, your position, or your popularity? That core is your character, and that is the only thing you can truly bequeath to the world. Your actions, your kindness, your honesty, your resilience in the face of your own personal battles, these are the seeds you plant that may grow in others long after you are gone. A general is remembered for his conquests only as long as the history books are read, but a person remembered for their character becomes a part of the moral soil from which future generations grow. So let's bring this from the ancient world into the quiet of your own mind. I want you to engage in a thought experiment that the Stoics would have called a memento mori, a remembrance of mortality. It's not about being morbid, it's about being focused. Imagine your own funeral, not to dwell on the sadness, but to hear what is being said. What would you want your closest friend to say about you in their eulogy? Not the list of your job promotions or your material acquisitions, but the description of your character. What adjectives would you hope they would use? Would they speak of your unwavering integrity, your boundless compassion, your quiet courage, your infectious optimism? Now hold those words in your mind. Those words are your target. Those virtues are the legacy you are building right now, today, with every single choice you make. Every time you choose patience over irritation, honesty over convenience, or courage over comfort, you are carving another letter into that legacy. The question is not whether you will leave a legacy. You absolutely will. The only question is what kind of mark you will choose to leave. But how do we move these powerful ideas from the pages of ancient history into the hustle and chaos of our own modern lives? The true value of Stoic philosophy is not in admiring it from a distance, but in weaving its principles into the very fabric of our daily existence. This is not about becoming a sage overnight or retreating to a mountaintop. It is about making small, consistent choices that gradually build an unshakable inner core, allowing you to navigate your own battles with the same clarity and resilience as a Roman general. The goal is to transform philosophy from an abstract concept into a practical operating system for your mind, a set of tools you can reach for when life inevitably gets difficult. It begins with understanding that these are not just ideas to be learned, but practices to be lived one deliberate moment at a time. The Stoics themselves were relentless pragmatists. Epictetus, who taught from a simple chair in Greece, made this point with undeniable force. If you didn't learn these things in order to practice them, what did you learn them for? His message was clear: knowledge without action is meaningless. The entire purpose of studying virtue, reason, and the nature of control is to change how you respond to the world. It is to close the gap between what you know you should do and what you actually do in the heat of the moment. This is why Stoicism is often called a philosophy for the street, not the classroom. It is designed for the parent dealing with a child's tantrum, the professional facing a looming deadline, the individual grappling with anxiety or disappointment. Its power is revealed not in perfect understanding, but in imperfect practice. The most effective way to begin is by anchoring your day with intentionality through a morning meditation or preparation. This isn't about emptying your mind in silence for an hour. It is a 5-minute mental drill. Before you even check your phone or get out of bed, take a few moments to preview the day ahead. Mentally walk through your schedule and bring to mind the Stoic principles you might need. Remind yourself of the dichotomy of control. Today, I will focus only on my own efforts and actions, and I will accept the outcomes I cannot change. Visualize potential challenges, a difficult meeting, a tedious commute, and rehearse responding to them with calm and reason instead of frustration. This simple practice sets a psychological anchor, preparing you to meet the day's events as a mindful commander rather than a reactive passenger. Equally powerful is the ancient practice of the evening examen, a dedicated time for honest reflection. Just as a general would review the day's maneuvers, you can audit your own actions. Find a quiet moment before sleep to ask yourself a few simple questions. Where today did I act in accordance with my values? Where did I fall short, perhaps by snapping in anger or acting out of vanity? What was one external thing I mistakenly treated as good or bad? The goal here is not self-condemnation but calm, objective analysis. This nightly review is how you close the loop on your learning, extracting valuable lessons from your own experience and gradually aligning your behavior more closely with your principles. It turns every day, even the difficult ones, into a curriculum for self-mastery. Beyond these dedicated moments, you can embed micro-practices throughout your day. The next time you feel a surge of anger in traffic or anxiety before a presentation, create that critical pause. Take a single deep breath and ask, is this within my control? This 2-second intervention creates the space for reason to override reflex. Another powerful exercise is voluntary discomfort. Choose to take a cold shower, skip a meal, or walk instead of drive. This isn't about masochism. It is a strategic drill to prove to yourself that your happiness and peace are not dependent on perfect external conditions. By willingly embracing a minor hardship, you rob future, involuntary hardships of their power to disturb you. You build the psychological muscle that says, I can handle this. The sheer volume of these exercises might feel overwhelming, but the Stoic approach is to start small and build consistency. You don't need to overhaul your entire life today. The most impactful step is to simply choose one single practice and commit to it for the next 7 days. Perhaps it is the 5-minute morning meditation or the nightly review of your day. Maybe it is the practice of pausing before you react to a provoking email. Don't try to do them all at once. Master one. Make it a non-negotiable part of your routine. Observe the subtle shift it creates in your mindset and your interactions. This is how you build your inner citadel, not with a single grand gesture, but by laying one sturdy, virtuous brick every single day. So as we've journeyed through the minds of these ancient commanders, a powerful tapestry has emerged, woven with threads of emotional control, resilience, duty, and presence. These were not separate tricks in a toolkit, but interconnected strands of a single, unbreakable rope that allowed Roman generals to bear the incredible weight of command without being crushed by it. They mastered their internal world not to become unfeeling statues, but to become clearer channels for effective, virtuous action. Their resilience wasn't a denial of pain, but a profound understanding that hardship is the forge where true strength is tempered. Their sense of duty was a compass that guided them toward what was right, not what was easy, and their presence was the superpower that allowed them to cut through the chaos of battle and see the decisive move that others missed. By weaving these principles together, they achieved the ultimate leadership goal. They commanded armies, shaped history, and yet managed to guard their own humanity against the corrosive effects of absolute power and relentless pressure. This entire journey brings us back to the profound wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, who perhaps said it best when he wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." This is the essence of the Stoic inner citadel, the unshakable fortress of character that we all have the capacity to build, brick by daily brick through conscious practice. The Roman generals didn't possess some secret gene for greatness. They simply committed to the daily excavation of that inner fountain. They understood that the most important territory they would ever conquer was the landscape of their own minds, and the most significant victory was the one won over their own fears, desires, and aversions. Their legacy is not just in the maps they redrew, but in the timeless example they set. That true power and peace are never found in controlling the world around you, but in mastering the world within you. Now, this history is more than a fascinating story. It's an invitation. The same pressures that faced a general on a dusty plain 2,000 years ago face us in our boardrooms, our homes, and our daily lives. The battles are different, but the human experience of stress, uncertainty, and responsibility is fundamentally the same. The Stoic principles that fortified them are just as applicable to the challenges we navigate today. They offer a way to lead our teams with greater integrity, to parent with more patience, to pursue our ambitions without being consumed by them, and to face setbacks without being defined by them. This ancient philosophy provides a framework not for a life of grim austerity, but for a life of profound purpose and resilient joy. As we bring this exploration to a close, I want to leave you with a question to carry into your own week. Look back over the principles we've discussed, the focus on what you can control, the practice of pausing before reacting, the reframing of obstacles, the detachment from outcomes, the cultivation of gratitude. Which one of these Stoic principles resonates most deeply with a challenge you're facing right now? Which one will you choose to embrace to better lead your own battles? The path of the Stoic isn't about perfection, it's about progression. It starts with a single, conscious choice in a single moment. If you found value in this deep dive into ancient wisdom and want to continue the journey, consider subscribing to the channel for more insights on how to live with more strength, clarity, and purpose. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to exploring these ideas with you in the next video.